MLK Day here on the stream. We're going to talk about the great man himself a little bit, as well as talk about how some people perceive him today, or try to get others to perceive him, which is wrong in many ways. And so let's get right to it. Yeah, MLK is revered today, but the real king would make white people uncomfortable. It's an interesting title. I really actually like what the man stood for, compared to how he's whitewashed. So not all white people will be uncomfortable. Not all white people. So it's kind of a generalization there. I believe. So let's get into this, guys. Martin Luther King is used a lot for optics politically, I think. He's used a lot to talk about togetherness and union, but most of the time, when certain people are talking about him like that, they're just trying to weasel their way into getting partisanship when they don't offer it, much like the Republicans. You know, the only time they seem to invoke MLK is to discredit things like fighting, like BLM. You know, I've seen actually people do that. They say things like, "Oh, Martin Luther King wouldn't have been approved of BLM and their riotous behavior and blah blah blah. He would have condemned them." I've heard that before. Things like that, things of that nature. Not necessarily true. And so let's get in this article a little bit here. It says, every year on the third Monday in January, America hosts a Sadie Hawkins-style role reversal where the entire country pretends to celebrate a man whose achievements and values they spent the previous 364 days ignoring, demonizing, and trying to dismantle. Today, your favorite vote suppressors will take a brief respite from disenfranchising black voters, denying history, and increasing inequality to celebrate a real American hero. That's right, it's MLK Day. You might think it's a little disrespectful to refer to a great American hero by his initials, but in this specific case, it's perfectly fine. The actual Martin Luther King Jr., who lived and breathed, is not the man most people will be honoring today, because that Martin Luther King is dead and gone. No, the man upon whom they will heap their performative praise and special media virtue signaling is MLK, a caricature of a man whose likeness has been made palatable for white consumption, like BLM, CRT, and USA. The people who King fought against have now managed to flatten a three-dimensional symbol into a three-letter chant-worthy phrase, worthy of demonization or deification. And this makes a lot of good points here. The idea of Martin Luther King and who others have made him is a lot different from the man that actually existed. And then I would argue to say that the man that actually existed and actually lived was much more based than the man that they make him out to be post-mortem. So yeah, I think this has it on the money as far as that's concerned. And you can kind of tell that because there's a lot of people that like will quote MLK, but they don't quote some of his more, I guess, radical points of view. Like, you will never hear a Republican quoting Martin Luther King when he said, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching a spiritual death." You probably wouldn't hear most Democrats actually quoting Martin Luther King on that, because none of them believe that. Another one, "The evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and racism. The problems of racial justice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power." Sounds pretty fucking base to me. Sounds pretty awesome, in my opinion. But you will never hear that quote espoused by your modern day politicians. Maybe Bernie Sanders. Uh, I don't even know if it's like it's a very, very powerful statement, a very, very controversial statement in today's politics, but that was a quote directly from Dr. King. Another one: the price that America must pay for the continued oppression of the Negro and other minority groups is the price of its own destruction. You'd think that they'd probably ignore that one, huh? Let's see here. And then white Americans must recognize that justice for black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of our society. And this is very true. And this goes back to the economics. Martin Luther King was very, very class conscious. He knew that there were a lot of people that were suffering in America, and that a lot of times black people and other people of color were used as scapegoats to distract white people, to give white people a boogeyman so that they wouldn't fight for their own rights. This happened quite a bit, actually. Michael says he wasn't killed for wanting and into racism. He was killed because he spoke out against the caste system. And I believe that's probably quite true in many, many ways. I think that he was black had something to do with it, because they figured if there was a plot against him that goes beyond the person who kills them, which a lot of people believe, if that was the case, they found that it probably would have been easier to do it because he was black. Not necessarily that's the reason, or because he was fighting racism, but it was. I mean, that was part of it, though, was because that fight against racism was a fight against the caste system. It was a acknowledgement that there was problems in America, and it was trying to get rid of their boogeymen so that they couldn't hide behind him anymore. And then let's see here, a couple more. Whites, it must be frankly said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to reduce themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn. The reality of substantial investment to assist Negroes in the 20th century adjusting to Negro neighbors and genuine school integration is still a nightmare for all too many white Americans. Even today, like, I know of a few people who don't like that kind of stuff. Like, they don't like black people in their neighborhoods, like you hear that still to this day. These are the deepest causes for contemporary abrasions between the races. Loose and easy language about equality, resonant solutions about brotherhood fall pleasantly on the ear, but for the Negro there is a credibility gap he cannot overlook. He remembers that with each modest advance the white population promptly raises the argument that the Negro has come far enough. Each step forward, a sense an ever-present tendency to backlash. And you see that again today. You see that with people fighting against BLM and saying, trying to demonize BLM for fighting for equality and for the rights of black people not to be brutalized by the police, things like that. You see that still to this day happening, and you see it in the white nationalists who are espousing the great replacement theory. Even Tucker Carlson is on his own show does this kind of thing. So yeah, this is something that, again, directly quoted from Martin Luther King Jr., but definitely not something that the today's society or a lot of people in today they probably either try to not credit to him or say that it was a lie or try to escape from it. If you said this was a quote from Martin Luther King to, like, say Kristen Sinema or to maybe even Joe Biden or Pelosi or to Mitch McConnell or to Donald Trump or any of those guys, they would either run from this question as fast as possible. I would be shocked if any of them said he was wrong and tried to make him out to be bad because of this. Because, they don't do that kind of thing. It would be like the same as talking bad about George Washington. They've made him into this legendary figure, which he should be, but not always for the reasons that they, put together or put forth in media and on the bully pulpit in Congress, or on Twitter. Another one here. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed, which is exactly really what BLM was. And again, they were demonizing of that, the right, the far right, the nationalists, people like that. And last but not least, again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifices. Capitalism was built on the exploitation of black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both black and white, both here and abroad. This is from the Three Evils speech, which I highly recommend you guys look up and read. This is, everybody quotes the "I have a dream" speech, but this is the one. This is the one that that really gets me, to be honest. Oh yeah, there was a lot of exploitation of Asians, especially at the turn of the century and stuff, with the railroads and with the gold rush and things like that. Today they're being demonized for, like, just regular citizens on the street are being beaten up because of the coronavirus, and a lot of Donald Trump's rhetoric calling it the China virus and stuff like that really exacerbated the situation and demonized the whole culture, rather than just a few people that made a heinous error in their judgment while they were testing viruses. I really like that, those quotes in particular. But I'm telling you, that Three Evils speech, very good. I did want to go back to this article. I'm not condemning this all-American tradition of gaslighting, talking about the MLK Day. I had an imaginary friend growing up, and he was not nearly as eloquent as this history refurbished MLK they have invented. I, more than anyone, can appreciate the effort of this country has put into manufacturing a version of King that is based on a true story. Whitewashing the entire human being is not as easy as you think. Plus, I understand why they do it. The real Martin Luther King would make white people uncomfortable. Again, I hate this framing in this article. I think that's awful. I don't get made uncomfortable by that. I would say it makes the people on the right uncomfortable, but not necessarily all white people. I'm sure it makes a lot of white people uncomfortable, but I actually truly celebrate who the man was. Anyone who knows the whitened story of Martin Luther King Jr. understands why white-splaining, what MLK would have wanted, is a favorite pastime of politicians and performative sympathetic social media allies. So yeah, they said that's what, they'd always say that's what my MLK would have wanted. Oh, he would have wanted us to come together and vote the way that I want to vote. That's what MLK would have wanted, He wants unity between the people, and for us to give tax breaks to the richest people. That's what MLK would have wanted. Stuff like that. They're ridiculous in their rhetoric and their propaganda, using a man that would have been so condemning of them. Yeah, it's easy to speak for the dead since they can't speak. Yeah, but that's that's what I'm saying is you can go back and look at the entirety of what the man believed, and you can see what kind of man he was. I mean, that stuff's not. They didn't burn all those books. All those speeches are still recorded. They're still out there. It's just the stuff that they push forward on mainstream media and all of the right-wing people in government. They push that forward, the stuff that they can cherry pick and clip out of context. And they take that stuff and they push it forward. And yeah, same way they appropriate the founding fathers. Very true. The average American might get the heebie-jeebies if they knew they were celebrating a radical who challenged systemic racism, supported reparations, and advocated for a universal basic income. Although in death, he became one of the most revered figures in history. For the entirety of 39 years that king lived and breathed, there wasn't a single day when the majority of white Americans approved of him. In 1966, Gallup measured his approval rating at 32% positive and 63% negative. That same year, a December Harris poll found that 50% of whites felt King was hurting the Negro cause of civil rights, while only 36% felt he was helping. By the time he died in 1968, 3 out of 4 white Americans disapproved of him. In the wake of his assassination, 31% of the country felt that he brought it on himself. That's tell us what you truly think, guys. Tell us what you truly think. Because they're not doing that anymore. Well, it might be what they truly think. It's just they're so far removed from what the man actually was that they can, use him as their token hero, and not realize that 90% of what the man stood for is completely antithetical to who they are. One does not have to reach back into the historical archives to explain why King is so despised. The sentiments that made him a villain are still prevalent in America today. When he was alive, King was a walking, talking example of everything this country despises about the quest for black liberation. He rallied against police brutality. He reminded the country of its racist past. He scolded the powers that be for income inequality and systemic racism. Not only did he condemn the openly racist opponents of equality, he reminded the legions of whites who were willing to sit idly by while their fellow countrymen were oppressed that they were also oppressors. He who passively accepts evil as much as involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it, he who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it. To be fair, King readily admitted that it was his goal to make white people uncomfortable. Just before he condemned white moderates in a letter from Birmingham jail, he revealed that his goal was to create the kind of tension in society that will help men rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism. He went on to explain that nonviolent direct action, King's primary strategy to effect progress, was an attempt to induce the white community to a point where marginalized people's desperate cries could no longer be ignored, which is an amazing strategy, and it harkens to what BLM does. It harkens to the fact that they were out there. We're not going to be silent anymore. Martin Luther King Jr. also said that riot is the language of the oppressed. There's an anger within them. It's not necessarily condoned by King. He doesn't condone it whatsoever, but he does understand why those things happen, which is something that I think we all kind of need to, an objective lens of things. A lot of times try to put yourself into somebody else's shoes, have that empathy and that critical thinking working all the time together. The thing is, guys, is that Dr. King was someone who wanted a lot of what people who are on the left, past Democrats even, want these days. They want a universal basic income for people. They want income inequality to end for all people, white and black. He says that in the quote that I read earlier. He wants to see that there are equal footing for people, no matter what their economic abilities are, no matter what their skin color is. He wanted to make all of this stuff where he wanted to rile things up. He wanted to be radical, make people think. And I think there's a lot of that going on today now. And I hope it continues, because it's definitely in his spirit as much as people in the right wing and people who try to whitewash Dr. King would have you believe. BLM was something that he would have believed in truly. Many of the other attempts for things like voting rights that's going through Congress right now, he would be condemning Joe Biden for not fighting hard enough for his agenda, is what he would be doing. He wouldn't be saying that the filibuster should be something that goes before voting rights. He wouldn't say that. In fact, I believe there were some points that he made about the filibuster in his own speeches and his own rhetoric that condemned it as well. So I do think it's important on this day to remember who the man actually was, and that we take the time to think about the things that we need in our society that he was an advocate of, and to condemn those who take the memory of such a man and try to twist it into some version of a token hero for their causes. It happens all too often, and it really needs to stop.